There's a human advocating. Humans give the loans. It's not a computer. A computer has a part in it.
Yes. Somebody somewhere is sitting around with a big checkbook and he's got to sign.
Welcome into the Get Invested podcast, a podcast about all things real estate and real estate investing, brought to you by Capital Velocity Investments and a part of the Matthias Talks Investing Substack.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Get Invested podcast. As always, we're your hosts, Jordan and Matthias, and we're excited to be here to talk all things investing, real estate, and real estate investing. Today, as we have been, we're sticking to the wheelhouse, sticking to real estate investing. I'm going to talk about partnerships, leveraging them in order to make a deal happen, essentially. And leverage is not just a business jargony word in that instance, because like any other kind of leverage, when you take on leverage, it is a risk and a reward. So we're going to get into that and all the different kind of partners that are part of, that's too many times saying part, Matthias, but the partners that
I didn't do it.
that are in this endeavor with us in various ways and levels. So that's after stumbling through that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah. I think one of my top skills, I believe, is understanding risk and finding ways to mitigate risks. So we were talking before we hit record, but basically I view having anything that I cannot control personally with my own mind and physically control, I view as a risk to an investment or to my investors. So partners are indeed included in that. So, and not that I don't trust my partners. That's why I'm in business with them. And why they are my partners is that I do trust them, because if it's an unknown, again, I view uncertainty as risk. So if I don't know something, it's risky. Just same as I can't control it. If I don't know it, there's risk associated. It's pretty hard to quantify that risk too. So when it comes to partners I know are inherently less risky than partners that I don't know, right? That just makes sense. So as I'm going through checking boxes on what the risks are for any particular investment, if I start off and all the different boxes that we check for an apartment complex, you've got the loan, the property itself, who's going to run it, how it's going to go, who's going to help me run it, all those different things. Those are all a big stack of risk. And the more I can check off in the process via partnerships that I know and can vouch for and that I've worked with before, that risk just goes further and further down or is reduced. So that's kind of the way I look at it when we discuss partners as being an instrument of leverage. Having a known quantity is the leverage that we want.
Which in basic terms of leverage, it would be the equivalent of safe leverage or minimal leverage, or, you're not overexposed. Obviously, I'm just thinking about all the different ways in which people talk about leverage, such as like taking on debt to do something. That is part of business. There's no way we're buying these properties without a mortgage, for instance, but there's ways in which to do that correctly.
Cash investors. Anyway.
Yeah. There's a way to do that, right? Where it's safe and known. And then there's ways in which there are more variables than, I guess, other times, or maybe necessary.
And constants.
Or need. Yeah, more variables and constants. Right. So, that's the thing that we talk about a lot.
On the spectrum, the closer we can get to
constants, yeah.
The better
putting it.
The investment is, yeah.
Because you talk a lot, and we've talked a lot about the times when, in an instance of leverage, as in debt, there have been too many variables of how things need to go in order to make that leverage work. Versus we know that the leverage will be known and steady no matter what happens moving forward with the market, right, for instance.
Exactly.
So kind of the same idea, trusted partners known, well, even if things go sideways, these things. So.
Yeah. And that's something I actually even wrote that down is, and this could be anywhere and we'll talk specifics on some of the specific partners in a minute, but how the partner acts during stressful times when things aren't going right, how they act when, there's legal issues or who knows. And this all comes from experience, right? So the more you work with somebody, the more you understand how they're going to operate, how they're going to react to certain situations. So obviously when you first start out, you're going to have to find somebody with a track record somehow that you can glean from that. But then again, you've never technically worked with them per se. So there's always going to be some uncertainty, always. But again, if we can move that slider closer and closer to the constant side of the equation versus the variable side, then I think you can trust that it's going to be copacetic whenever certain situations arise, depending on whatever this particular partner's role is with the team.
Right. Like you said, if you can fill in more of the information, right, before you hit that calculus button, right? And
Exactly.
that's essentially what it is. Like, them, that's more information.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, that's more kind of numbers in the spreadsheet before you hit enter, as it were, and see what comes out. Not that we're going to reduce our very nice human partners to a spreadsheet. That's not what
numbers.
That's not what we're going for here. But just
Right.
kind of draw a parallel about risk.
Yeah. So we'll go through kind of a list of partners here real quick, and then we can kind of touch on them each a little bit. But basically, starting off at the top, capital partners, GP partners, however you want to look at them, the people who are going to help run and operate the investment. So decision makers with the investment that are on the manager team with me. They're kind of the top of the pyramid. Well, or you could look at it as the base of it, whatever, however you want to say it. But they're among the most important because decisions they make can affect the overall outcome every bit as much as anything I do. So we've explored partnering with certain other people that we've ended up not partnering with, because you need to have really very similar philosophies on how you view investor money. Above all, in my opinion, I won't partner with somebody who doesn't view investor money as the end goal. Investors making money, protecting investors' money, that is always the number one goal. Now, I too would like to make money. I am one of the investors, but I understand that even if things were to go completely wrong in any given investment, any particular project, goal number one is always to preserve investor capital at all costs. That my reputation depends on me acting as if that is the case, and it will never not be the case, and I will never allow it or partner with somebody that wouldn't have that same thought in mind. So, anytime I partner with other members of the manager, capital partners, GP partners, that's probably number one thing that I'm viewing and the biggest factor. Skill sets are nice, but at the end of the day, I need to have somebody who I know, you know what I mean? Somebody's good at project management or renovations or what have you, anything that's going to go on over the life of an accountant type partner. Step one is making sure that we align on how we view investor capital, and we can go from there, if that makes sense.
Right. They talk a lot in sports about locker room culture mattering more than necessarily personnel. The organization has a culture that the personnel come in and they mesh with, and that remains. And when this is successful, that remains no matter who.
Right. It can go the other way as well. I mean,
exactly.
The Oakland Raiders and now the Vegas Raiders are an organization. So,
yeah, no, it definitely can go the other way.
Browns.
I was thinking
Jets.
Yes, exactly.
Sure.
I was just thinking that you were saying skill sets are less important than basically aligning philosophies.
And I would argue
you
that
can learn a skill, you can't necessarily change.
Exactly. You could be the best,
it's a lot harder to.
Most efficient operator, the best project manager. You could have, tireless or whatever it is that we assign to you as a group. But if you don't agree, then your decisions are not guided the way that we need them to be guided.
Yeah, because at any given moment, the skill set is there to execute a vision. And if that vision is not
it doesn't match what exactly. They got their own vision going on, then 100%.
They're executing something different. The execution itself is not, it's like, well, you did it. I don't know.
You did what you said you were going to do, except it just wasn't what we wanted you to do.
Yeah, it's like, exactly. So something
you did it very well.
Yeah,
exactly. And then I guess moving on from the GP, and we're not going to get into specific partners that we partner with, things like that. I mean,
right. Last thing I would just say on the GP thing, and I think it has to be the bottom of the pyramid, right? Because pyramids, the more important ones are at the fundamental of the base. Because the other thing about a GP is they're in there with you when there's probably the most at risk and it's the most uncertain, right? When you're trying to get a deal done and the money could be just left on the table or in other people's pockets, more accurately, I guess. But
exactly. Potentially signing on the note with me whenever we take, and obviously non-recourse debt is optimal, and the bigger the loan, typically it's non-recourse. But I have partners that have signed with me on recourse loans, meaning if something were to go to the property and it was underwater, that's coming out of my personal assets and their personal assets. So, so it's a base of the pyramid is a good spot for that type, and we need to align. But next, we talk about it all the time, but whoever your property manager is going to be, I could have the greatest vision just like we said earlier, it's the opposite, right? Like, so if I have the greatest vision and the perfect plan, if I don't have anybody to execute it on the ground at the property, I've just been blowing smoke around. It has to be executable, and there has to be a team that can do it, that can pull it off. So I would argue that's probably the second most important of all the different partners that we could have, because again, I am not in the property management business. I'm in the asset management business. So I'm able to make those strategic decisions, but I do not have the time or the ability or the expertise to talk to individual tenants to gauge what they're telling me in terms of what they like about the unit, don't like, dealing with vendors. That's why we have professional property managers, because they're better than that. None of this would ever happen if we didn't have professional property management alongside as a partner.
Right. I was wondering somewhat about, talking about skill set. So obviously the property managers themselves, like the people on the ground, literally, that's one skill set. That's yes, we need this layer, this facet of the organization. To move back though a little bit, just thinking about skill sets, is there a skill set on the GP side of interacting, interfacing, use other business speak, working with the property management to make things happen? Like, is there a particular level,
good chemistry,
some people who are just better at doing that part of asset management than others?
100%. Some people are analytical, and I don't want to say not personal, but some people just don't communicate freely and kind of let everybody explore what they're trying to say or what they're thinking about when you're, because we have strategy meetings with our property managers all the time, right? So if they don't feel like everybody's comfortable speaking to whoever's on the call, then everybody. I think what I'm trying to say is there's good communicators, there's good chemistry between the asset manager and the property manager, and then there's people who are able to think of second and third order effects really quickly. So if let's say a property manager says, hey, we've got second story units that we've got some toilet leaking issues on. And then, it's on the asset manager to start going, well, okay, there's a second story. So what's going on in the first story? Do we have issues that, and you just gotta be able to, otherwise you're just going to be calling back and forth all day, every day. You've got to be able to, in order to keep everybody as efficient as possible and working on what you need them to be working on, you have to be able to communicate, make decisions, and move on quickly. That's typically one of my skill sets, and it's an experience thing too. So I've been doing it the longest of almost anybody I've partnered with. So it's second nature to me at this point, but it is definitely a skill set. And I've seen it in other partnerships. I've seen it in other investments I've made where I'm not involved. So you could just tell, right? Like there's some people who are better at the integration between property management and asset manager than others are. It's just, of course, just like any other skill set.
Right. And I can imagine there's various reasons why, whether outside of intercommunication, interpersonal skills, if you have a background in, for whatever reason, in construction or whatever, and the asset management is working with property management on renovation, there might be someone who brings more to the table and can have quicker conversations.
Right. You've seen this type of issue before. And so you kind of know what happened the first time you or the other times you dealt with it. And you kind of got to go, oh, yep, last time something like this happened, we did this and that, and we messed that up. It's just, like I said, experience kind of helps deal with that. And then the critical thinking, if you're telling me this, what could be causing that, or what are the effects of that, whatever this data point that's passed to you by the management team. Yeah,
it seems like part of that skill set would be definitely as much asking the right questions and good questions than it would be any kind of having ideas yourself necessarily, at least not at the beginning.
Yeah. Agreed.
All right.
Next we got, so we've got kind of two tiers, and this is all kind of pre-acquisition of the property or during the acquisition, and then for the operations and ongoing would be like the lender and the insurance team. So we've worked with insurance teams before that just move at their own pace, weeks and months to get a very basic quote, which anybody who's ever done commercial insurance or applied for it or tried to get quotes and stuff, it's a painful process. And then a lot of times people don't like to give quotes until they see 100% of all the facts. Like they want to see if has there been any claims in the last several years. They want to see very, very detailed, specific information on the property that you just may not have. It is very hard, especially when you're buying a property. It's hard to get all those details with any sort of quick timeline. It's always a huge turnaround. It's always a pain because you're going through like 4 or 5 different levels of bureaucracy at some point. Right. Oh, by the way, the people who are getting insurance information understand that they're probably about to lose their insurance. So they have zero incentive to get anything quickly to anybody.
Mm.
You know what I mean? They get paid based on renewing that insurance, not necessarily just helping somebody find new insurance with a new buyer or whatever. So all those things. But we've worked with insurance people that don't understand the sense of urgency, that I could care less, basically. You're just at the mercy of their timeline. So responsiveness, especially on the insurance side, and this is all just up front when you're getting quotes and holding the insurance. But then if you ever have to make a claim, which we've done before, you also want to be able to have them talk you through it, because anybody who's ever had to make a claim, especially on a significant loss on a property, there's a lot of things that if you don't do it right, you're talking tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars that you could be missing out on, or that you've incurred for yourself on accident, not knowing, going about it the wrong way. So again, when they're trying to earn your money, if they don't seem responsive, then how responsive do you think they're going to be if they've already earned your money and just operating the life of the policy or whatever? So obviously the insurance product itself is important, but the players are as important in getting it to you and trusting them to help you and protect your assets. That's what insurance does for the life of the investment.
It seems to me that kind of level, or a facet, or whatever you want to call it, with lenders, insurance, and I guess honestly, I think we could probably throw brokers in there, right? That's all tied to your knowledge of the market, right? And how much you have experience with that market, because that way you can use, if you're in the same market, you can use the same insurance person that you know is good. You use the same lender at the same bank that you know is good. You know, the broker brought you the right kind of deal. So that's very locale specific cultivation. It necessarily has to change if you're going to another state, because that's just not where they do these things that are physical.
Not necessarily.
Maybe the insurance
most likely.
But, yeah.
Well, I mean, you could be licensed in multiple states.
Yeah,
brokers can as well. So I mean, it can travel, but obviously area of expertise, like you can't have an unlimited area of expertise. You know, your broker can be really good in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, but he may know nothing about Pensacola, Florida, or whatever. So just because he's licensed somewhere doesn't mean it's his expertise. But it could be. That's subject to verification on kind of every project. So moving on, lenders very similar to the insurance basket is, hey, is he responsive? He or she responsive? Do they understand how I like to do business? Do I trust that they're taking it to all of their potential? You know, do they have a big enough net of lenders out there that they're bringing it to for a mortgage broker? All these things are definitely in there, because it's a high risk, high reward game in terms of that lending. Because if a loan doesn't close, mortgage brokers don't get paid, same as a real estate agent or whatever. But are they going to find ways to solve problems during the life? Something always comes up. There's never been a closing ever in the history of closing real estate transactions where issues didn't arise. And are they able to tackle those? Do they have enough experience themselves to be able to, hey, you know, this happened on a deal I did a couple of years ago, and we did this, that, or the other thing to fix it or get around it or to replace it with this or that. And those are valuable. A mortgage broker or lender on your side is definitely worth a box to check on the risk list, as it were.
Absolutely.
Especially if you're committing a bunch of funds. At me as the sponsor, the manager, committing a bunch of my own personal money up front before we ever get to closing, trusting that there's a lender that's going to help me get to the closing table, so that all my funds aren't just, you know, lost in the foray, as it were.
Right. Having a lender who's looking to solve issues and problems and make it work, without obviously bending rules and being unethical.
Sure. Yeah. But I mean, ethics are a thing too, right?
Yeah. So because I think it's one of those things that if we're talking to anybody who's new to the game, as it were, new to this whole thing, they may not realize how much all of this happens because people wanted to figure it out. Because there's always going to be obstacles. It's not just, we just plug it in. And if it says thumbs up, we do it. If it's thumbs down, we don't. Like, it's not, I think a lot of times we might reduce things with numbers, essentially, like a loan, to either they're credit worthy or they're not. And it's like, that's not how it works at this level. And having someone on your side who's going to push it through in some form or fashion,
Yeah.
is a big deal. It's a big deal. There's a human advocating. Humans give the loans. It's not a computer. The computer has a part in it.
Yes. Somebody somewhere is sitting around with a big checkbook and he's got to sign.
Yeah,
If he doesn't sign, nobody gets the money.
So,
yeah. And just to your point, like I can't tell you the amount of times trying to get to closing, there's this particular bank or this particular lender has a policy that makes absolutely no sense for this particular transaction, but it's a policy. And then there's some guy sitting back in an office, a cubicle somewhere going, oh, wait, it doesn't meet this thing. And he just goes, stop, we're just not going to do it. And then everybody else who wants something to happen and cares about accomplishing can go, hey, what does it take to get an exception to that policy or to get approval? You know what I'm saying? Like
to check the box.
There's always
that.
kind of I'm trying not to talk too bad about that guy sitting in the cubicle, even though he makes my life miserable too many times, that whoever that guy is. But it takes somebody who's thinking outside the box and who's actually trying to accomplish more on both sides, whether it's on my side or on the bank side, that, somebody, whoever's a policymaker is at his institution. It requires somebody asking the right question to the right people, understanding the process enough to go, hey, well, how can we make this work? What do we need to do to make this work? And then kind of working from there. That's a skill that lenders have. Good lenders have.
And you can imagine a varying number of circumstances when, as you keep saying, the guy in the cubicle, because it could be like, this is literally his job. He has to flag this, but there's a difference between flagging, sending it back and being like, hey, got to take care of this. Here's some ideas, or just, hey, this is something you got to do before we can move it further. Just letting you know. And the just like huge no stamp,
a huge no stamp. Sometimes it seems like there's a guy back there with a no stamp, he just filled it up with the prettiest red ink, and he just can't wait to find something to stamp with it.
Yeah, and then just kind of disappears back, and you wait for.
I have solved today's problems. I will go back to my cubicle.
Exactly, and it winds its way back rather than it being a direct kind of like, hey, person. And I can imagine
a roadblock, a hurdle that we're going to have to figure out. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that seems more institutional level than one single lender. Because as good as one lender is, if he's at a massive place or she's at a massive place, she can't like reach into the Byzantine.
Yeah, exactly. It's
policy land
and bureaucracy, right? Which the larger the institution is, the more bureaucratic processes and systems and stuff they got to deal with. But yeah, so I guess the last few that I wanted to mention would be the accounting / CPA team that doesn't necessarily need to be involved prior to closing, but then all of our compliance, all of our tax filings, all the tax benefits that we hand out, all of it needs to be very carefully vetted. And some of these transactions just can be ridiculously complicated. If we have a whole bunch of investors and a whole bunch of different kinds of investors, the IRA investors, tax consequences are different than just regular cash investors and all that stuff. And especially if some of the bigger investors, we're talking 30, 40 investors, all with varying instruments of investing, it can be very complicated. And that requires a lot of time and attention to detail in order to get that right. And, it's impossible to do everything 100% right the first time, but then it also takes that same level of expertise and diligence to kind of we'll keep reviewing. And as we discover things, well, one, are we able to discover things we missed as we go through these, during tax season, especially, we're always working on getting better about solving problems with the accounting before tax season, because then it saves everybody a bunch of time.
And that's just improving
stress.
Processes.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, if you're not careful, turns into that dreaded bureaucracy you're talking about, because that is the point of, I know bureaucracy gets a really bad name and I understand why, but there is a reason that it exists.
Yeah, you have to have systems. Otherwise, exactly.
You're just figuring out the same thing again and again.
Exactly. Reinventing the wheel all day, every day, which is every bit as time consuming as it turns out usually. So that's just a very valuable team member. And there's a lot of trust there because, listen, I know a lot. No, I know a little about a lot. But I do not know enough about the tax code and about how you file partnership returns and how the IRS requires you to allocate income.
20
and
different states involved.
Gazillions. And all these different things. Yeah. And so it's not necessarily possible for me to verify 1,000% that everything that CPA did is correct. But they're, so there's a level of trust there that, in honestly, the CPA has the same kind of ethical requirement, or they have the best interest of everybody at heart. And so if they're willing to put their name on the paper and sign on your behalf in terms of, hey, I prepared these, they put their name on the tax returns, then I know as a partner, they have the same moral compass, let's say, as I do. Then when she puts her, for instance, my CPA, our tax accountant, when she puts her name on the tax return, I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah.
There may be mistakes. It's impossible to avoid all mistakes, but she's putting her name on there. She knows that she's done ethically what's supposed to, she's not claiming something that is not allowed to be claimed, or fudging the numbers here, fudging the numbers there. I trust her enough that I'm confident when her name's on there that my investors are taken care of. Even if there are mistakes, we can go back and fix them. Basically, because in an audit, or this is a little sidebar, I suppose, but in the event of an audit, they're going to look and see, hey, there was mistakes made. You may even get fined with penalties because you owed more tax than you thought, or whatnot. Very rare. We don't play big enough ball to make it worth auditing our stuff. But in the event they ever were, the only time you're ever going to get in trouble is if they find out that something was intentional. Yeah. Right?
And there's a difference between a whoopsie mistake and fraud.
An accounting error. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing that can eventually come back to haunt me, is if it ever seemed like the accountant or I, fraudulently put some information down or whatever. And that's the part of trust that I have, that once she puts her name on there, I'm comfortable knowing that neither of us are in danger of that type of repercussions.
Yeah. She may not have put money in as an LP, and she may not be part of the GP team, but that's skin in the game.
But her name's on the line. Yep.
Yeah. Skin in the game 100%. For sure. I was thinking, you brought up CPA, and most of that's after the fact. One of the ones that we haven't really talked about yet, that we just learned a pretty big lesson on as a partner, is the SEC attorney and other advising attorneys, and the part they play, especially when you're, let's say, incorporating a new to you investing strategy or entity
structure. Yeah. So we discovered a fun way that they can impact your investment. It's just, there is risk there. And sometimes you can overlook those risks, and things could go poorly based on either legal advice you're given, or, if your paperwork is not
the filing.
On time, or it's not correct, according up to the latest legal code or whatever. Because again, same as the CPA, there are some giant books on how you're supposed to do some of these things. And it's impossible for me to know every intricate detail. That's why you pay thousands of dollars to attorneys who do this. So just like anybody else, they can lead you astray as soon as a tax accountant leads you down the wrong path, whether intentionally or not intentionally. It's just, hey, that's part of the business. You gotta, having that partner is valuable, one you can trust, that's going to keep you safe from damaging yourself, doing something illegal, doing something unethical, all these different things.
Right. As we round it out, I was thinking that there's kind of a distinction in the partnerships between like the ones that should naturally come up in a conversation with investors, and then the ones where it's like something probably went wrong for them to come up in the story, right? So like, oh, I'm talking to investors about my SEC attorney. Something went wrong. I'm talking to my investors about one of my great GP partners who's also in on this deal. That's just probably natural conversation.
Yeah.
Especially since they've probably been introduced to them, at least in a Zoom call or something, if they're an interested investor. I mean, unless you want to just praise one of those other partners, obviously that's different. And I brought that up because the last thing I wanted to ask about, because we're talking about leveraging partnerships and it being a risk and trust and essentially all those kind of parameters that we discussed at the beginning. What are the kind of conversations you have in the instance that things do not go smoothly? I guess more, what are the conversations you have with investors when a partnership doesn't pan out the way you were hoping? I mean, we're not getting details there, but it has happened.
Yeah. I'm a broken record on that. Is just, hey, I'm going to be 100% honest, truthful, transparent. Like, I'm not trying to hide anything that happened or didn't happen, or what I assume that was wrong, or what I assume that was incorrect. Whatever it is, my philosophy is always, look, at the end of the day, I'm here to help people build wealth. And so I'm trying to help people. I'm not always 100% perfect, and neither are all my partners that I've chosen to partner with along that path. So to me, I'm always like, look, I'm trying to help you, but here's where I fell short, or here's what happened. It doesn't necessarily have to be a major thing either. Just like, hey, we were trying to do this. That didn't happen. The biggest thing I always highlight is if there is any risk to any funds of theirs.
Right.
What are the potential risks to their capital if they are indeed an investor that I've taken capital from or whatever? So at the end of the day is to tell them with utmost honesty and clarity what the potential risks are, whether it's, hey, things are going to take longer, or, hey, we had to figure out a new partner, or, hey, we had to figure this out, whatever it happened to be, or, hey, we moved on from that investment, or whatever it is. My goal is to share whatever any potential risk would be to them or any of their capital.
Right. Yeah. It makes me think that in some ways there's more of a matter of risk taking, I guess, and quote unquote leverage when you are, as we've done a couple times, a part of the raise team or the GP team, but not in charge. Like, that's where you always say, like, if I'm in charge, that's lower risk to what I
to me, because
that's when you find yourself I feel like could find yourself in a more fraught conversation with an investor, when like you can't just be like, well, this is what I did, this is what this person did, this is what happened, this is what we're going to do next. It's like, well, this is what these other people decided to do, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
I mean, not that you're putting blame, but just that like you were not in a position to, you're not going to sell yourself to someone who was in charge.
Sure. Yeah. Ultimately, I view myself as responsible, whether or not I'm making the final call on the property or whatever. That's true. I mean, but then that's why the bottom line GP partnership matters so much, is that, hey, at the end of the day, do I trust them to protect investor capital the same that I would? And if I don't believe that that's the case, then I can't, especially not if they're going to have control of the entity. Final say, let's say, I can't partner with that because that's a risk I'm unwilling to take.
Right.
However small. It's you know what I mean? It's outside.
Sure.
It's outside anything I would ever want to expose my investors to.
Well, I believe I'm out of questions.
I think we did it.
All right.
We got it.
Well, yeah, we'll round it out there. We appreciate, as always, you guys hanging out and listening. Please reach out if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, notions, concerns, etc. We'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, we're going to get out of here, and we hope you come back next week and join us again for another edition of the Get Invested podcast.
See ya.